So we're coming out of a weekend where there were some controversies about refereeing and calls and what did or didn't happen, and this team got robbed. I do find it ironic that the New England Patriots are complaining about being robbed potentially, but regardless of that, there's also the whole Spygate thing that goes on with New England. It's always fun to cover the New England Patriots because they just continually provide controversies right, left, and center, and yet they always end up winning at the end of the day. So they're really the perfect villain. That being said, welcome to what is likely the last full power rankings for the year, because honestly, there are a lot of teams that I will rank for the last time today, and then next week it'll be something completely different. I likely won't be using this big board anymore. This is likely the end of it for this season. It's been successful enough that I will continue it next year, but next weekend we will be much closer to seeing who's playing who in the playoffs, and then we can start getting into some speculative stuff that's kind of fun. So tune in for that next Tuesday. Number 32, and these guys, it's been a fun run. They're out of the playoffs. They're 1-12. And yeah, the Bengals, it's a lost season completely and totally. We'll see what they do with the number one draft pick this year, what they do with their entire roster this year. How long does this go before it's... as a Bengals fan, it's just depressing because I knew it wasn't going to be a great year, but this is worse than I thought it was going to be. At 2-11, also out of the playoffs, clearly, the New York Giants. They are officially eliminated, even though their division sucks. Their division really sucks. It is the worst division I've seen in quite a while. And I'm old enough to remember 7 and 9 teams making the playoffs. And didn't Dallas make the playoffs at 7 and 9 one year too? I know Seattle had an 8-8 season where they made the playoffs. It's just sad. But anyways, the New York Giants, they're eliminated. And question I heard them debating today was whether or not Eli Manning can find another landing spot in the NFL. I don't know. I don't know if he can or he can't, but New York is in some trouble. At 3-10, these guys are still 30th, and they're out. They are officially eliminated with that 10th defeat. Washington, who were alive far too long because their division sucks. It's a terrible division, and they're playing their role. At 3-10, they've had some close games, but 3-10 means you shouldn't be anywhere near the playoffs. You shouldn't have been alive when you were 3-9. So yeah. Also at 3-10, out of the playoffs, is Miami. And let's go ahead and take a moment to drink this in, that Miami at 3-10 are much better than expected, which is damning for these three teams being beneath them. But they're better than was expected, and they could have been 4-9. They could have been 5-8 with a couple of breaks here or there along the way. There were a couple of their games that were actually pretty darn close, and it's easy to kind of shunt them aside and go, well, it's Miami. But maybe there's something there. Maybe they'll be able to build on this next year. Maybe next year we're talking about them being 7-9 or 8-8. Nothing crazy, but maybe they can get respectable next season. Number 28, these guys are 3-9-1. They're out of the playoffs at 3-9-1. You can talk about the Cardinals being competitive. The reality is they've lost 9 out of 13. They've won 3 out of 13. No matter what way you cut it, when you need a victory, it's not likely going to come from the Cardinals. And it's kind of an ongoing theme with them. And it's surprising how many of these teams have been mediocre to bad for the length of time they have. But again, every year you start anew. Every September, everybody's like, all right, this is the year. We're going to turn it around. At 5-8, out of the playoffs, and maybe the ultimate example of every year, all right, this is it. The New York Jets. The New York Jets, every year, it's all right, this is it. And they've won enough games, and they've looked competitive enough when everybody's healthy and everybody's kicking that you can say, you know what? We'll be all right next year. This will be fine. This is going to be good. And every year the Jets get some of their fans' hopes up. Some others won't have their hopes up. They're going to be like, no, you guys have done it to me too many times. So at 5-8, we'll see if they run the table and make it a respectable 8-8 season. If they end up 6-10, 7-9, or 5-11. But either way, for the Jets, it's another one of those years. At number 26, at 5-8, out of the playoffs, is the Chargers. It's been a miserable season. And apparently Phillip Rivers won't be coming back for the Chargers. And now they're being tied to potentially Drew Brees next year. Speculative. It's not going to get better, is it? It's not going to get better for the Chargers, is it? Yeah. I had high hopes that the Chargers at least would be a playoff team this year. I didn't have any hopes they'd actually be a contender, but I had thought at this point of the year they should be 8-5, not 5-8. That being said, at 25th, these guys are not mathematically eliminated yet. They're 5-8. They are 11th in the AFC. They're still mathematically alive. They have the tiebreaker on the Chargers, but they're not going to make it. It's not going to happen. They are one game away from being eliminated. So I wasn't going to bump them ahead of a bunch of other teams that are mathematically eliminated, because that's not a reason to bump somebody up. Like, well, mathematically they're still alive, so I'm going to bump them up. No. 24, they're 4-9. They're mathematically out. That's the Jacksonville Jaguars. That they've been a disappointment this year. They did look like they were going to recover, and then they didn't. And so they find themselves out. So all of these teams you see right now, likely don't see on any board next week when I talk about playoffs and pictures and all that other wonderful stuff. So for Jacksonville, it's been a rough year. It's not the first time Jacksonville's had a rough year. Probably won't be the last. Number 23, these guys are 3-9-1, and they've stayed, and again they're out. They've stayed ahead of teams because they have had a couple of losses along the way that I felt like they were really unfortunate with. Of the teams that are currently on the board, I think they have the best chance of turning it around next year. It's going to require some changes. Maybe it requires a coaching change. Maybe it requires a couple of personnel changes here and there. I don't think there's a lot to panic about with Detroit, but not a playoff team and nowhere near the top half of the board. Early in the season, they were flirting with the top half of the board, and now they're back down in here. Number 22 at 4-9, they're out as well, but it's the Falcons, and I got to say, the Falcons, I still have some hopes for the Falcons, Matt Ryan, and I know that they're out this year, but I still think next year they could have a bounce back as well. Whether they do or don't remains to be seen, of course. None of us know the future if we did. I'm sure that's something the Patriots are working on. I'm sure at some point Robert Kraft and the boys will figure out a way to make a time machine, and they'll just use it to rig games in their favor. Well, we knew what you guys were going to run because we went into the future and we saw which plays you ran in the game. And like, why didn't you guys bet on all the sports and why didn't you guys I don't know, win the lottery and stuff? Oh, all we were worried about was winning a football game. We'll rig it however we need to. I know. They're not that bad, they being the New England Patriots, but eventually that's how we're going to end up as seeing them. This just crooked. Number 21 at 5-8. These guys have crashed, and they are out, and they are rightfully out, and that's the Panthers. And I'm not sure what the Panthers do from here. I'm not sure what the solution is. But yeah, they're out. They're not making it, and rightfully so. At number 20, these guys are 6-7, and you want a team that I'm kind of rooting for next season, who are mathematically out, and that's Tampa Bay. I would love to see the Buccaneers get back in the playoffs next year. They've had their bad breaks here and there. They could easily be 8-5, and again, you got to win the games. We'll get to New England, but you have to win the games. You can't make the excuse of, well, you can't hold that loss against us because, we shouldn't have lost that one. Well, there's a lot of football teams on the board already where fandoms could point out, hey, well, we shouldn't have lost that game in week 4. We shouldn't have lost that game in week 7. We shouldn't have. You've got to win the game. So Tampa Bay, I would love to have them higher, but they didn't win enough games for me to push them up any higher. 6-7 at 19th, and they're 9th in the NFC right now, and that's Philly. The fact that Philly could win the division is startling. And they're tied for first in the division. They just don't have the tie break. So all of the speculation that, well, Dallas will just win the division. I'm not there. I'm not there because Dallas can't put anything away. And not saying that Philly can. They're both below 500. The honest answer is who should win the division? Neither. This is another argument in favor of changing the playoff format in the NFL. Please, for the love of God, change the playoff format in the NFL. I'm an NHL fan. Playoff format in the NHL has its flaws. Nothing like this, where a team that's below 500 could win the division and host a team that could win as many as 12 games and still be a wild card. It is ridiculous, absolutely ludicrous. And at this point, with the way that the Eagles and the Cowboys are playing, I think 7-9 is wholly likely impossible for both of them. At 18, these guys are 6-7. They're 8th in the AFC. And you know what? Cleveland's not out. Technically not out. And they can make headway. And I tell you, if Cleveland actually makes the playoffs, that would be startling. I don't think it happens. I think they'll find themselves eliminated pretty darn quick. But the fact that we're still talking about them being mathematically alive, considering some of the storylines that have come out with Cleveland over the year, going right back to week 1 when they penalized themselves into the ground, it's insane. Absolutely insane. Now ahead of them, also 6-7, technically behind them on the tiebreak, so they're 9th, is the Raiders. The Raiders, all over the board, 6-7, and again, I kept saying during the year I wanted to see a more consistent result with the Raiders. I never saw it. Odds are they probably missed the playoffs, but again, the NFL's been kind of unpredictable this year. When we look at the record right now of the San Francisco 49ers, I don't think anybody picked them to be that good. I think Garoppolo, I think we thought, well, he could be good, but I don't think any of us expected this kind of performance from him. So, the Raiders, the inconsistency with them, we'll see what they do the rest of the year. At 16th, and these guys are technically 10th by the tiebreakers. There's numerous tiebreakers, but they're also 6-7, and that's Indianapolis. So by tiebreaker, 8th, 9th, and 10th. On my board, 16th, 17th, 18th. I don't know that it necessarily matters. I don't know that any of these three end up making the playoffs. If they were in the NFC East, they'd be racing for the title. But, the reality is Indianapolis has had a very good season considering the way it started with Andrew Luck going, I'm out of here. Been impressive, and we'll see whether or not they're still on the board next week. Because, again, if a team's mathematically eliminated, I don't think there's any need for me to have them on the board. I don't think I need to use this gigantic board anymore for that. And I can go to a smaller board, and we can get a more concise video going. Number 15, these guys are 6-7, and they're 4th in the NFC because they're the Dallas Cowboys, and they lead the craptacular NFC East, which is really sensationally craptacular. I really don't want to see whoever wins the NFC East to win a game in the postseason. That would be very upsetting. If Seattle, say, ends up being that top wild card and they go to Dallas and they lose, that there's no justice in that. None. That Seattle doesn't get a home game in the playoffs is an injustice enough. And that's where we're at. So, yeah, Dallas, we'll see what they do from here. They may very well fall. Maybe Philadelphia gets that spot as the division winners. I don't know. 7-6. These guys are 8th in the NFC. They're 7-6. They could miss the playoffs. The Bears don't deserve to miss the playoffs behind Dallas. They don't. The Bears have had an up and down season themselves, but I do think they've been mildly better overall this season than Dallas. And they seem to be getting better as the season goes along, but the odds of them making the playoffs get longer and longer every week, and they could find themselves in the out position on Sunday. Number 13, these guys are 8-5. They're 6th in the AFC. That's the Steelers. Steelers, pretty solid run for them. They were left for dead after, I think it was week 6. They were 2-4. I think they were 2-4. Gone pretty well since then. We'll see what the Steelers end up doing come postseason. I am assuming they end up making it. I am assuming that they end up holding off Tennessee. That being said, Tennessee's 8-5. They're 7th. The reality is the Steelers have the tiebreaker on Tennessee. So if these teams end up both being, say, 10-6, they get in. They don't. So the pressure is on Tennessee to basically run the table and hope the Steelers stumble along the way. But the Steelers have this history of just making the playoffs and being pretty darn good in them. And so between the two organizations, because of the history I know of them, I would probably say Pittsburgh wins that race. It's going to be fun to watch, though. Number 11, these guys are 9-4. They are 5th in the AFC. They are the top wild card, and that's Buffalo. Buffalo is a very good team. Don't get me wrong. They're a very good team. They are 11th overall, and if I had told Buffalo fans at the start of the year, on my power rankings, you guys are going to be 11th at the end of the year, I think people would have been like, that's great. But because their record is 9-4, and it is better than a couple of the other teams that are on the board, and because their defenses look pretty darn solid, there are people who don't like the fact that their ranking is not higher and feel that they should probably be in the top row. For me, they're in a weaker division, and when they play against the premier teams in the league, they're close. They don't generally win those games, though. So being close is nice, and it shows that they belong ahead of some of these other teams, but I can't justify having them higher up. Number 10, they're 8-5. They are 7th. They're not going to make the playoffs. That's the Rams, and it's a shame. It is an actual crying shame that the Rams aren't going to make the playoffs. At 8-5, well, these guys at 6-7, these nimrods over here, I'm just kidding. But the fact that 6-7 could make the playoffs, 8-5, and your odds are dead. The Rams have looked pretty good overall this year. They've had a couple of bad games, yes, but it's insane to me that at 8-5 we're having this discussion like they're probably not going to make it. It's insane, just insane. They could run the table, go 11-5, and miss the playoffs. It's not likely. If they run the table, they could do it, but they need help. Somebody's got to, knock Minnesota down and give them that opening. But, man, we'll see. Number 9, these guys are 10-3. They're second in the AFC standings, but I have to knock them down. They lost again. They've played 4 good teams in their 13-game schedule, and they've beaten one of them, and that one was Buffalo. They lost to Kansas City, and I know it was a play that fans weren't happy with the call. New England wasn't happy with the call. I've heard all the talk about it. But they lost the game. They were in a position against Kansas City to lose that game, and they lost it. So, did they get hosed on a call? Yep. Does it happen? Usually to the teams against New England, yes. So, you're not going to see a whole lot of pity from fans of other teams. You're not going to say, New England got hosed? Oh, not New England. So, yeah, New England drops out of the top row, even though they're 10-3. Because every time they've played a good team, they've lost. They've lost 3 out of 4 against the good teams. And a lot of those 10 wins came against teams that are down here in the bottom row. So, yeah, there you go. Number 8, these guys are 8-5. They're 4th. They defeated the New England Patriots not that long ago, and that's Houston. They are 4th in the AFC, which means that if they played New England in the playoffs, they go to Foxborough, which is fine. The reality is Houston has performed very, very well this year. Last year, they were my hard luck story. They were the team that I think was over the first 3 or 4 weeks. They just couldn't buy a break, and they should have won games they weren't, and I felt bad for them. They ended up making the playoffs. This year feels more like it's been a good season all the way through. Yes, they've still lost 4 out of 12, but they've won the 8 out of 12, and I genuinely think these guys can do some damage in the playoffs. You want a dark horse going to the playoffs, I would go with Houston. Number 7, these guys are 9-4. They are 3rd in the AFC. Kansas City. And they beat the Patriots. So this is where we're at. Kansas City, Houston, beat the Patriots. Baltimore, whoop the Patriots. So, again, we'll see what happens in the playoffs. We know what happens in the playoffs. We all act surprised in January when Bill Belichick and the Patriots are the Super Bowl champions. Act surprised. But for now, Kansas City's ahead of them, and they look like a pretty good bet to win their division. And, yeah, we'll see what ends up happening with them in the playoffs. Number 6, these guys are 9-4. They are 6th in the NFC because the NFC is ridiculously stacked. And that's Minnesota. This is the team that if you're a Rams fan, you want to see them fall apart. You need to see them fall apart. And the Vikings are a team that, because we're all fixated on New England and we're fixated on Baltimore and Seattle and San Francisco, nobody's really talking about Minnesota. And yet, if the playoffs started tomorrow, I don't know. I think Minnesota could maybe go and score an upset victory over New Orleans, because I don't think anybody's taking them all that seriously. And again, it's Minnesota. I know the Vikings' history. I know they aren't known for being fantastic in the playoffs, but maybe this is their year. They're 9-4. 9-4 is a good record. In 5th place at 10-3. 5th in the NFC is Seattle. I believe these guys are 9-4 as well. That shouldn't have said 8-4. So Seattle, 10-3, solid record. Probably going on the road to Dallas to start the playoffs. It's crazy. Seattle's been awesome. They did lose their grip on first in the division. They do have a chance to wrestle that back, but for now, they are 2nd in the division. They are the number 1 wild card, and to me, a dark horse to make a run to the Super Bowl. The NFC is going to be fantastic in the playoffs. I'm just saying, the playoffs on the NFC side are going to be just crazy. Absolutely crazy. Number 4, these guys are 10-3. They're 2nd in the NFC, and that's Green Bay. Green Bay just keeps winning. It's what they do. It's what Aaron Rodgers does. And it should be a surprise to no one that Green Bay is this high on the board. They're an amazing team. And we'll see whether or not they falter and allow Minnesota a shot at it. I'm not thinking that they will. At 10-3, and I believe already having salted away their division, they're 3rd in the NFC, and that's New England. So Green Bay has a tiebreaker on New England, or on New Orleans. Sorry. Green Bay has a tiebreaker on New Orleans because Green Bay is 8-3 in their conference, or 7-2 in their conference, and Green Bay is 8-3. 8-3, 7-2, something along those lines. Anyways, it's conference play. Green Bay has the lead on New Orleans, and there really isn't a whole lot to separate these teams. So if you think Green Bay's better than New England or New Orleans, I'm so used to New England being at the top that I'm not used to New England not being in the conversation at this point in the video. So I'm just like, New England, and it's New Orleans, the Saints, the fleur-de-lis. It's New Orleans, not New England. Stop with the New England. Which means that number 1 and 2, nothing changes. They're 1st in their conferences. They're both 11-2. If that ends up being the Super Bowl, it's not going to surprise anybody. And we already saw in the matchup between the two teams a couple weeks ago, because this could be a fantastic Super Bowl. We could be seeing one of the greatest Super Bowls ever. And I mean that. We've seen some great Super Bowls over the years. We've also seen some blowouts over the years. I really think if we see San Francisco and Baltimore, we could see the greatest. And a matchup between two teams that may not have been featured very much by people early in the season, or especially preseason. And Baltimore, they struggled out of the gate. For a team that's 11-2, they didn't look like they were going to go 11-2 about 5 weeks into the season. But boy, they've been a machine. And this is an impressive run. And of course, San Francisco with a really impressive game against New Orleans. We'll see if they meet each other again in the playoffs. But there you go. There's the last power rankings of 1 through 32. Next week, we'll do something completely different. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. Thank you guys so much for your support throughout this season. I've been asked about Mandalorian reviews and such. Mandalorian, I feel like I have to review after the season's done. And, of course, I'll be seeing the Star Wars movie this month as well. I'm excited about that. And so I'll be doing videos on all those kinds of topics. And AEW, I've been trying to fit it in, but with hockey season being as busy as it's been and having a lot of the hockey-related items demanding my time, it's been difficult for me to fit everything in. But I will find a way to do so. Thank you guys so much again. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. I will talk to you again soon.